I'm going to read the introduction of a book that has been published this past year titled Stranglehold, an intriguing behind-the-scenes glimpse into the private world of professional wrestling. And who can deny that professional wrestling is one of the most incredible phenomenon that has sort of taken over the entertainment industry in the last 25 years or so. Larry Nelson worked and played with the biggest names in professional wrestling, all the trappings and intrigue of the excessive, fast-paced, self-indulgent showbiz lifestyle saturated his daily routine for more than a half-decade. This former American Wrestling Association announcer also served as the signature voice, play-by-play, color commentator, and producer for ESPN in the 1980s. Finally, from the words of one who has been there, an insider's view of the power, glory, fortunes won and lost, sex, drugs, and other vices that have a stranglehold on the movers and shakers of one of the most popular entertainment attractions of our generation. The book is written by Larry Nelson and by Jim Jones. Jim Jones, who is a native Vermonter who was transplanted in Denver, Colorado, and with whom I've had the pleasure of working with years ago at the stations that are now part of the Hall Communications Group. And Jim went on to do a lot of work in radio in the Denver area, now works for the Jones Network with syndicated programs throughout the country, and has authored several books, including Stranglehold, the most recent. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning.
Hey, this is like old times.
It sure is. 20 years can really go fast, can't it?
Yeah, you know, time flies when we're having fun, right?
Remember the first time I drove up to the station in my 57 Chevy?
Oh, boy, that turned a lot of heads. You still have that, though, don't you, somewhere?
My brother has it, so it stayed in the family, sure.
Fantastic, fantastic. Jim, it's great to have you back here and on the Radio Vermont microphones. What got you, and I know you've had a personal interest in railroads, and you've authored a book on railroads, and you have many credits, photograph and writing credits on American railroads. And your dad has, of course, established his reputation doing that. What got you to write a book on wrestling?
Well, as you mentioned, I work for Jones Radio Network, which is no relation, by the way, and I didn't leave Vermont and start up my own national radio network with the millions of dollars that I made working in Vermont radio as an announcer.
What?
I guess that's kind of an inside joke for those who don't know. Radio is not the best paying profession.
Now you tell me, after I've been it for 35 years.
After a couple of years in the business, huh, Joel?
Right.
Well, my whole initiation into the wacky world of wrestling came when I met Larry Nelson, as he and I were radio announcers for Jones Radio Network. Larry started there in late 1997 as a good time oldies announcer. That's a station that has 150 affiliates across the country, and he and I both worked on it.
This was when you were on KRZN. I've heard tapes of you before you went to Jones.
Yes.
And I tell you, you really established yourself as quite the announcer on one of the premier, really high-power oldie stations in the area. Of course, things change, and you do a number of different things now at the Jones Network.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I work. I have 3 different names on the air.
Let's see. Clem Cadiddlehopper is one, and what's the other?
I am Bo James on Classic Hit Country.
Is that right?
I am Jay Roberts on U.S. Country, and JJ on Good Time Oldies.
Do you ever mix them up?
Almost. What I usually do is I'll write out a card with my name of the day on it so that I don't forget who I am.
Mm-hmm. And these programs, of course, are syndicated all throughout the country. So fascinating how they do that. Of course, so you met Larry Nelson, who at this point in his life, in his 50s, had changed careers and now was back into radio. Actually, he had started in radio. I might mention to people who are just joining us right now, the book that Jim Jones wrote with Larry Nelson are primarily the recollections and stories of Larry Nelson's inside perspective of the wrestling industry. And of course, Jim himself did a lot of research as to the history and the incredible phenomena, the explosive phenomenon of professional wrestling, as it is perhaps one of the most popular entertainments. The millions and millions of dollars in merchandising, to say nothing of pay-per-view television, that has been associated with this phenomenon, is nothing short of amazing. And if you were to pick up a copy of Stranglehold and look at the color picture on the cover or the pictures within the book, you'd immediately recognize Larry Nelson, because he was the longtime ring announcer for the WWA.
American Wrestling Association.
AWA. Now, there's the WWF and the AWA, right? And he was in the American...
The AWA no longer exists.
Right.
What we have now is just essentially among the big players are Ted Turner's, and we also have Vince McMahon's competing head-to-head. It used to be that there were a number of regional wrestling organizations, but what changed the whole face of professional wrestling and the way that it was broadcast to the world was the introduction of satellite. And Ted Turner put his wrestling organization on the Atlanta-based, what is it, Turner News,
right.
TNT, the Turner-based Atlantic Superstation. I guess it's WTBS, isn't it?
Right.
And that was what really got the whole thing going on a not just national but worldwide thing.
The rivalry at the time between Vince McMahon and Ted Turner became quite notorious, and interesting how it's mentioned in the book that Ted Turner's approach was not really to better his own product, but doing everything he can to hurt the opposition. It was really tooth and nail competition, wasn't it?
Indeed. And the question on most wrestling fans' minds these days is this man worth your billion-dollar inheritance?
Yeah.
As you may know, that Stephanie McMahon's marriage to Triple H has cost her the loving support of a father, mother, and brother. But what Stephanie may not realize, at her young, tender age of 28, it may also cost her the fortune of a lifetime.
Isn't that something? The ring announcer, Larry Nelson, and the guy who did the interviews for the AWA, and that's when I saw this picture, I immediately recognized him. And some of those interviews, of course, people. I'm sure there are people who are not wrestling fans who are listening and saying it's all fake. Well, it's spectacle, and spectacle is part of almost every presentation, even sports that are more directly competitive. And what has happened to wrestling is that it went from you can go back to the times of the ancient Greeks when wrestling was a competitive sport, but as time progressed, it became more and more of a spectacle, starting out with the carnivals at the turn of the century. All the traveling carnival shows had their champion wrestler, and he would beat any challenger in any town. And in order to keep this interesting, these guys became more and more colorful with their costumes and with their names and with their appearances and with their alleged ethnicity. Somebody calling himself the Sheik could be of any ethnic background. Yeah, in fact, the one more recently, the Sheik, didn't he switch and become a Native American? Didn't?
Yes. So Adnan Al-Kaisi.
That's who it is, right? And he became like Chief Billy Bob or something like that.
And one thing they would do also would be that they might change from either, and I'll define what these terms are in just a moment,
Sure.
But they would switch from being a baby face to a heel and back to a baby face, and they might change their names in the process. And a baby face are the wrestlers who try to put out that nice attitude that a lot of people are going to embrace as, oh, aren't they nice guys? And meanwhile, the heels played a part of the bad, mean, despicable wrestlers.
This is one of the fascinating parts of this book that I found truly interesting. I picked it up last night, and I could not put it down. It is a terrific read in terms of the background. Even the wrestlers even have their own language. They have a kind of pig Latin that they use. That amazes me. Do you know how to do that, or would we have to rely on Larry to do it for us?
Yeah, Larry would be the best one to do the pick Latin, and we do describe what the wrestling secret language is within the pages of the book.
Yeah. So
I can't do it. I get my tongue all twisted every time I try.
You know,
he tried to teach me on several occasions to do it, and I just gave up.
Well, I have the page notated, and I wouldn't try. I have enough trouble with regular English than to try that, but it is interesting how.
And we're supposed to be the announcers.
We're talking with Jim Jones, who is co-author of Stranglehold, an intriguing behind-the-scenes glimpse into the private world of professional wrestling. A nice historical perspective, followed by the ups and downs in the career of Larry Nelson, who, we're quite candidly airs out a lot of dirty laundry. He was leading a very difficult and self-indulgent life, as well as that paralleled the many of the wrestlers. And he's quite candid about it, and the outcome, of course, seems to be a happy one, as he changed lifestyles and careers and is doing quite well now. But he was right in the thick of it when this whole wrestling phenomenon exploded. And if you can imagine what goes on in front of the camera with those interviews and all this hype and spectacle, a lot of that intensity takes place in their private lives as well. That's what I found fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Joel Najman, in for Mark Johnson today. Our guest during this portion of the program is Jim Jones, who is a Vermont native who is currently transplanted in the Denver, Colorado area, where he's working in syndicated radio, and as an author of a number of books, including Stranglehold, which is a behind-the-scenes glimpse into the private world of professional wrestling, a book he co-authored with Larry Nelson, who was the longtime ring announcer and interviewer of the wrestlers for the AWA. He sort of got into wrestling by actually bringing wrestlers onto his AM morning radio program at a time that the switch from music radio was going from AM to FM, as FM was becoming the dominant music force, and AM radio had to either change or fall behind in the ratings, something that's been an ongoing situation. That's why talk radio is finding itself on the AM bands and most of the music formats on FM, and it caught on like wildfire. That led to his doing a television program with the wrestlers. And I guess the real phenomenon was that people were very interested in who these characters were, because almost as entertaining as the wrestling matches themselves are those incredible interviews. Do you have some comments on that, Jim?
Yes, Larry talks a lot about the behind-the-scenes things that went on at interviews, and he said that anyone who valued their food would not put it in the refrigerator at the wrestling studio. He said that what might happen is either the materials would disappear, or they might be doctored in some way or another.
There was a lot of pranks. I mean, if you want just a good read about people having a good time, it almost was like a nonstop fraternity party. These people going from location to location, the things that took place in the hotel. I guess some of them were a bit dangerous and the lifestyle on the edge, but some of them are downright funny, and it just really shows the intensity of all of this. And it is showbiz at its absolute best and worst, if you want to take it from that perspective. And who better to have that perspective than the man that was supposed to be sort of the equalizer in all of this, the calm middleman, the announcer who tried to maintain some kind of decorum during those interviews. Wasn't there one time when Stan the Lariat Hansen chipped a couple of his teeth with his own microphone?
Actually, Stan did that to Larry.
Yeah.
And yes, I have some footage here at the house of Larry very soon after that happened, and he looks interesting on television with a half of a tooth missing. He looked like he was a hockey player or something.
By golly, so it's dangerous. There's one picture in your book of a couple of the wrestlers who grabbed a hold of the microphone from Larry, and all you see is like sort of the bottom side of Larry's shoes as he was going head over heels over a stool.
That happened with Larry Zbyszko, yes, and another wrestler.
Mm-hmm. And if you're interested in stories behind the scenes on Hulk Hogan and the Sheik and Stan the Lariat Hansen, the Barbarian, that was John Ord, I remember that. Ray Stevens, Nick Bockwinkel, is that his name?
Nick Bockwinkel, yes.
Yeah, famous wrestler. I go back, Jim, just for a moment, my own interest in wrestling was when I was a teenager, and it was just starting to happen on television, and I can remember... I don't go back as far as Gorgeous George, but I certainly go back as far as Antonino Rocca. And he was phenomenal because he was like the first real acrobat that did all these leaps from the ring. And people were fascinated by this. And so as wrestling, progressed as a visual phenomenon on television, you needed to be both big and agile. And some of these people are like fantastic athletes. And, of course, you can see what great shape most of them are in.
You would have to be a fantastic athlete, Joel, and that's one thing that they definitely deserve credit for. All of these people are in shape. You may see guys coming out with their stomachs hanging halfway down to their tippy toes and weighing 500 pounds, but they do have the muscle to back it up.
Yeah, back in the early days, I remember Haystacks Calhoun was about the biggest guy imaginable. And you talk about a number of the others who were much the same way. Got to talk a little bit about the merchandising and Jesse Ventura. Has there been anybody in the history of the entertainment business that has sold more T-shirts than Hulk Hogan?
No.
I don't think so. If you just look at kids' toy boxes, how many action figures of Jesse Ventura, Hulk Hogan, and the other wrestlers are there, and T-shirts and other souvenirs? This has really captured the imagination of people all over the world. It is a multi-million-dollar business, isn't it? That extends way outside the ring.
There are even people who are so into this that they buy replicas for hundreds and hundreds of dollars, brass and metal replicas of world championship belts that are held by their favorite wrestler. And I don't know if these are things that they wear in public or not, but maybe they just have a proud place on the mantelpiece over the fireplace. But wrestling merchandising is really big business, multi-millions of dollars every year.
If anybody doesn't believe that this is real, that these are personalities that people can relate to, the Jesse Ventura phenomenon, to be elected governor of his state in 1998, what an astonishing phenomenon.
So who do you think is going to be president in the election after the one that we're having now?
Well, is Hulk Hogan planning to run? He's been...
Maybe it'll be a Hulk Hogan, Jesse Ventura double shot.
I think I will move to Canada when that happens. Thank you, Jim.
You betcha.
Our guest, Jim Jones, author of Stranglehold, behind-the-scenes glimpse into the private world of professional wrestling, and it really is a great perspective and a good read, and it's nice to make contact once again with Jim, with whom I had the pleasure of working a good number of years ago, and Jim makes frequent visits to Vermont, and always a treat to see him. Also working on a book on railroads. We'll talk about that on some future date. I'm Joel Najman with Mark Johnson, and we are here on WKDR in Burlington and AM 550 WDEV in Waterbury and FM 96.1 WDEV FM in Warren.
That was really a last-minute interview. Should have been Larry, but it was so last minute that we didn't have time to get Larry out of his air shift that day, which coincided perfectly with a need for Joel Najman to have a quick alternative to an interview person who had been canceled. And he quickly borrowed Marilee's copy of Stranglehold, read it the night before, and the next morning we were on his live talk show doing our thing. Sadly, Larry passed away in the year 2014, leaving quite a void among those of us who knew him and loved him in radio and wrestling and all of these other endeavors that he had over the years. Larry was quite a colorful character, and he is sorely missed by all of us who knew and had a chance to experience part of his life with him.
Ravioli Jones!
Warren!
Why are you sneaking in here with your video camera, Ravioli Jones?
Say hi to Marilee.
Hi, Marilee. What's up?
I saw a sandwich in the refrigerator.
It's not yours.
Oh, it's not?
No. I didn't know if you were going to be here or not.
Let's see.
And I didn't tell her in time, so she didn't make you one. And that's the name of that tune.
I find it kind of amusing that there are places where people are trying to sell Stranglehold autographed copies, no less, for $100 or more, when you can purchase them directly from the publisher still, signed copies, for less than 15 bucks. Feel free to make your order of a limited edition remaining copies of Stranglehold signed by Larry himself back in 2000 when the book first came out. When I moved back to Vermont, I had a truckload full of Stranglehold copies that we've been selling one by one or two by two now for about 2 decades. Still got some left. Feel free to order. The information is on the screen. Thank you for watching and listening.